Good evening. There is a land of the living and a land of the dead. And right now, we are here together in this thin place called the Jacksonville Cemetery.
John, aren't you being a little overly dramatic? We haven't introduced ourselves yet.
Oh, of course. Well, I'll tell you, having a young wife really keeps a man on his toes, I'll tell you. I'm John Merritt, and this is my wife, Molly. Genevieve. Jennie. Oh, purgatory. Jennie, just go ahead and, would you say a few things about yourself? I'm a little addled.
I'm Genevieve Moore Merritt, and yes, everyone calls me Jennie. In 1875, I came to Jacksonville with my parents, Rebecca and William Moore, and my brother Robert.
That was the same year that I arrived in Jacksonville from Syracuse, New York. I was under contract to be the principal of Jacksonville's public school, and that is where I first saw Jennie, who was a student at the school.
And John was roughly 30 years old, and I don't believe that he knew I existed.
Jennie, you were only 7 years old at the time. I mean, how could I remember? I do have a lot of memories from those days, and some of them are very unpleasant, and some of them are very painful regarding my first marriage, and
John,
I can't even talk about them.
I know how difficult those memories must be for you. Understand that John lost his first wife, Molly, quite suddenly, and only 9 months after their first son, James, died of cholera, leaving him with the responsibility for George Henry.
You know, I strongly believe that we have to go on in life, no matter what happens or how difficult it may be. You know, love is never lost. It can be renewed again, as it was when I married Jennie. Life just has many challenges for us, and we have to be ready to meet them.
Such as the incident that happened at Jacksonville School that almost cost your position as principal. Do you remember?
I do remember. That was that little Alex Berry was the child's name. He was killed in a tragic accident. And it was custom then for the principal to close the school so that all the students could attend the funeral.
Oh, I was hoping you wouldn't close the school. I couldn't bear to see his body in that coffin.
Yeah, I did close the school, but I didn't close it immediately. Well, the boy's father became very angry with me. He wrote this accusatory letter to the newspaper trying to poison my relationship with the school board and get me fired.
Well, all was forgiven and it was rectified, because the town knew that John was an excellent principal. You see, while he was principal of the school, it was #1 scholastically in all of Oregon. In fact, I was part of the Merit Circle, the Honor Society, which is why I became a teacher at Sam's Valley. But I can also sympathize with John that being an educator is often difficult and unrewarding.
It often seems that the parents expected the teachers to correct all the mistakes that they made in raising their children. And if we dared to use corporal punishment as a last resort, well, we were really condemned, no matter if the child was out of control.
Well, after 9 years as principal, John left the school, and he went into the mercantile business, opening the Merritt Cash Store in Jacksonville. But John also knew that when the railroad bypassed Jacksonville, that the business should follow. So he closed the store after 4 years and opened the Merritt Cash Store in Central Point, which was very successful, and eventually opened a second location that my brother Robert managed in Gold Hill. That's where I met John as an adult.
Well, you know, with the cash-only purchases, you know, we were able to eliminate anything like having lines of credit without having to have legal help to try to collect large debts. I think we were the first store in all of Southern Oregon to use a cash-only basis. I read about it back east, and it worked well there, so why not try it here? You know, those were different times then. You know, you have things called what? Social Security, retirement benefits. You know, we didn't have things like that. I had a wife and a daughter to consider. I worked at several jobs. I managed 3 different farms. I worked for a mining company. I raised sheep. I even had 2 terms as a state legislator.
And I busied myself raising our beautiful daughter, Esther, involved with church and community activities. But I can tell you from experience that John needed a wife.
Well, that's probably true. Looking back on my own life, I always felt like I had a calling to be an orator, that public speaking did not really put any food on your table or pay off any debt. So I gave speeches when I could. One of my favorites was animation. That was the name of it. I gave to the Teachers Institute in Grants Pass. in 1885 it was. Yeah.
Why don't you give our guests a taste of that speech? I know you keep a copy in your pocket.
Oh, I was hoping that you would ask me that. Well, wonderful. The goal of this speech was to motivate people to be fully alive or animated before they join the millions, buried in the ground. Here's part of the speech. There's a mighty number of people living today who are practically dead. Others are half dead. He who labors neither with hand nor mind lacks every element that constitutes a living man. No animation makes a man a mere machine. A little animation makes a middleman, and much animation makes a truly living man. Teachers, it's your mission to emancipate the mind and teach animation in every aspect of life.
Before you get overly animated yourself, we do need to let our guests go visit other souls in the cemetery.
Oh, you're so right, my dear. Sorry. Good evening to you all.
Good night.